Hi, I'm back. Today I wanted to talk about the power of words and affirmations and how they can be life-changing for you. I was thinking about this because my children were recently asking me to repeat an experiment that I did a few years ago with them. And we're going to do it. Hopefully you'll want to do it too when you've heard this. And it came from me looking into the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, who is a Japanese scientist, and you can look into his work. He looked at the molecules in water and the way they crystallized according to the sounds or the words that they heard. So if this sounds crazy to you, you need to go read the book and see the images for yourself. You can Google it. But basically, if you look under a microscope at the teeny tiny molecules and crystals within water, they form and change into different shapes and patterns according to the vibration around them. So I've said this before, existence is energy. In fact, it was Masaru Emoto who said that, who I learned that from. Everything around us is energy, including, of course, water. We are mostly water. The earth is mostly water. It's the most abundant source that we have. And essentially what he did is realize that if water receives high frequency positive energy, it turns into these beautiful molecules and beautiful crystals and actually tastes better. And if it receives the opposite, then the opposite outcome happens. So he tested this with, for example, beautiful music. It was classical music that he used, and I think also some opera music, beautiful love songs, things like that, to show how the patterns formed into these really, really beautiful images. And then he also played some really angry, hateful, heavy metal and other styles of music that was really negative, low frequency. And they just kind of turned into splodges and blobs and didn't form in the same way. It was fascinating to see his work. And he also did that with words. So where he was saying really good, positive things to the water and saying negative, horrible things and looking at the differences in the outcomes in the molecules. So then what people started doing when his work became well known is that they would get this experiment where they had 3 glasses, and I did the exact same with my children, exactly the same kind of glass, and we half filled it with rice. And we covered it with distilled water. So water from the tap is full of loads of compounds, bacteria. It's generally horrible. Please don't drink it as it is, but also don't use it in this experiment. We use distilled water because everything is taken out of distilled water. So there's nothing in there that can mess with this experiment. And we covered the rice in equal amounts. And then we wrote on masking tape and stuck on the glass. On one glass, we wrote love. On the other glass, we wrote hate. And on the third glass, we wrote nothing. We didn't put any masking tape on that one. And then what we did is for a month, every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, we would go over to these glasses that I kept in the same place in my house, not in a sunny window, so they weren't being affected by the sun. It was in the shade, and they were covered on the top with cling film. And we would take the one that says love and we would say really kind things to it, all sorts of kind things. So I love you, but also you're beautiful, you're great, you're amazing, etc. And then we'd take the one that said hate, and the kids loved this bit because I would say, say all the horrible things. No swear words in our house, but lots of, I hate you, you're a stinky poo, you're a bum, you make me feel angry, you're ugly, all of these horrible things. And we'd say it, I said we have to say it with conviction because that matters. And then we would just completely ignore the third glass. We didn't do anything. We didn't move it. We didn't touch it. We didn't speak to it. At the end of the month, basically, we went to have a look and we took the cling film off the love glass, and it was kind of had a slight smell to it, kind of a musty smell, not too strong. And it had yellowed. It had gone a little bit yellow, the water and the rice on the top. Obviously, the rice had got fatter, but it wasn't terrible. So it had been sitting there fermenting for the month. We took the cling film off the hate glass, and we could already see this through the glass, but there were black splodges all over it, black and blue, grey, disgusting, mouldy splodges, and the stench, it was just disgusting. It was amazing to see the difference. And then we looked at the indifference, the one that we didn't write anything on that represented indifference, and the glass was worse than hate. So where hate had these splodges of mold, there were more of them on the indifferent glass, and it stank even worse. And we took from this experiment and learned. It was a brilliant one to do with the kids. I encourage you to do it if you have children, or just for yourself if you're interested. But we learned that, of course, indifference, ignoring somebody completely, giving them zero attention, is more harmful than giving somebody negative attention. We know that from the media, right? That they say all press is good press, even if it's bad news. Well, it kind of goes the same for us as human beings. We just want to be acknowledged. It doesn't have to necessarily be good. However, the negative acknowledgement resulted in a more degraded and unpleasant outcome versus the positive. So this had me really convinced of this idea that water really absorbs the frequency. And so we have a distiller at home, which is how we drink our water. And we put a label on there. We wrote thank you in 3 different languages, and we stuck that on, and we kind of rolled with that for a while. We don't do the general thanking our glass anymore, although that is a nice practice. But we definitely have kept that front of mind. We talked about how, of course, us being made mostly of water, imagine how affected we are when we receive indifference or we receive hate and anger versus when we receive love and kindness, and how important that is to give to everybody around us. So that, of course, got me thinking about affirmations. And I studied affirmations and learned about them. And Jim Carrey famously wrote that check to himself. And he wrote a $10 billion check to himself. And then 5 years later, I think it was, he was paid $10 billion for Dumb and Dumber. And lots of famous people talk about affirmations and visualization. This idea of athletes often use that thing where they imagine themselves winning the race, right? And positive phrases that they are the strongest, they are the best in order to achieve those outcomes. So affirmations are pretty big and pretty widely used. I don't think they're considered woo-woo anymore. But that really got me thinking and connecting dots when I was thinking about the water, the frequency of the water, the effect that had, and affirmation. So I started to use them. And I did think back to when my youngest son was just born. We were living in Spain. We didn't have friends or family close by. We'd started to make a bit of a network, but not a super close-knit one yet. And it was a struggle. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and we were by ourselves. Family did come over to visit, but on the whole, we were on our own. And my husband worked a lot, so I was on my own. And there was a period where my husband is a freelancer and he stopped getting work. And we'd bought a house and we were paying bills, paying mortgage, stressed about that. And as a freelancer, you do get these peaks and troughs of work. That's super normal. But he was worried about this dip. And then he came across this YouTube of somebody called Proctor, I think he's called. And it was just this monotonous voice saying over and over again things like, I am wealthy, I attract abundance, money flows freely to me. Things like that. And I remember that being the background to our life for a couple of months because he just had it on all the time. And I said to him, what on earth is this? And he said he'd just come across it and he was giving it a go. Oh my goodness, the effect of this on his subconscious and on our finances, and I can only put it down to that, were amazing. So we do have peaks and troughs as freelancers, of course, and maybe there was an element of the work wasn't there and then it was coming in, but I really saw a difference. We saw a marked difference in his clients contacting him when he was playing this Proctor versus when he wasn't. So that was a real it works. I've seen it work really close to me and I've heard these other things about it. And it was later that I did the experiment with the children. Obviously, they were a bit older and saw the effect of the words and the frequency on the water. So affirmations since then have really become a part of my life. When I want to call something in, I will write an affirmation for it. Or if I'm struggling with something, a lack of security about myself, I'll give myself an affirmation. If I have an objective, I'll give myself an affirmation. So they are words of positivity, words that can help you reach a goal, but they're not just words. Because the other really cool thing that I learned is that we have this system in our brain called the reticular activating system, the RAS. And what the RAS does for us is takes the big picture and focuses down on what it is that we want to look at. So our eyes can take in loads from our surroundings, but we need to stay focused on what we're looking at. Otherwise, we'll get confused. So that's what the reticular activating system does. And it's useful with affirmations because the focus is whatever our brain is telling it to look for. So if you're saying over and over again, I'm clumsy, I'm bad at storytelling, I'm not creative, I'm forgetful, etc., etc. Whatever story you're telling yourself about yourself, your brain is looking for evidence of that. So the reticular activating system is looking for evidence to prove you right. That's what it does. It looks to prove you right, and it ignores data to the contrary of what you're thinking. So if instead of those negative stories, you tell yourself positive stories like, I'm beautiful, I'm joyful, I attract joy wherever I go. I attract wealth and abundance into my life. Happiness flows to me freely. Whatever it is that you want to achieve, if you start saying those affirmations, those phrases over and over again in your head, your reticular activating system will scan the horizon and search for evidence, ignore evidence to the contrary, and find you evidence of those things. Find joy, find happiness, find you remembering something, find you being elegant and graceful, so that you can replace those stories, because then they become your reality. So the more you think about them, the more you find evidence of them, you have it in front of you, the more that becomes your reality. You can rewire your brain. Neuroplasticity has now been studied to the point where we really understand the malleability of our brains, the fact that it's like Play-Doh and we can change it and rewire it. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, loads of really amazing, important scientists are talking about this effect. We can rewire our neural pathways to be whatever we want them to be positive instead of being negative. So it doesn't matter what's happened to you. It doesn't matter what stories you've told until now. If you want a new story, you can have one. You just have to choose your affirmations, think about them constantly with conviction, maybe say them out loud, maybe write them down like Jim Carrey did, and they can be real for you. So my recommendation with affirmations is to choose an I am, so an adjective for that one. I am joyful, I am efficient, I am organized, I am playful, whatever it is that you want to be. And to choose another one where you say I have or I attract. So you can use a noun and you can change it slightly. So I have the ability to remember, I attract wealth and abundance, I have joyful moments in my parenting, I attract happiness every day. And they really need to be personalized to you. There are loads of affirmations out there, and you can copy. By all means, if one that you've read or seen or heard calls to you, it speaks to you, then use it. But it's really useful for you to make it super personal to you, because that's where your brain will believe you, because you'll have more conviction and belief in the story. Affirmations and words are so, so powerful. They can change your life. We all know that we don't really understand the entirety of the power of the brain, but it's there for the taking. And this is a really great way to test it. So maybe start by trying out the rice experiment. If I can find a picture of the one we did a few years ago, I will insert it now so you can just see the difference of the glasses. Try the rice experiment, try the affirmations, try one to start, just one. And maybe choose a moment where you are doing something subconscious on autopilot, like making your tea or coffee in the morning, or having your shower, or driving on your commute, and choose those moments to say your affirmation over and over again. And the more you start to do it in those moments and connect it to a habit you already have, the more likely you are to remember to do it, and the more you will do it during the day. The more you do it, the easier it is for your brain to find with the RAS, the evidence, and give it to you, and the quicker it will become your reality. I hope that I've convinced you to think about the power of your words. And of course, don't forget to be kind with them. That's the most important thing. Just smiling or saying something kind to somebody could completely change their day, and indeed change your frequency and the crystallized molecules in your body. So it's worth doing. It's a win-win for both sides. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.